the all-consuming nothingness spreading throughout the world. A saint trapped forever in the memory of his last day alive, a coward with a plan born out of pain and resentment, and the blind sheep who follow him to their own demise. And this is the best, and the worst, the series known as Pillars of Eternity has to offer. Welcome to Ye Olde Entertainment. My name is Alex, and as you know, it is my duty, my mission, my purpose in life to help you decide whether that game that you have been thumbing for so long is indeed the right game for you or not. And today, we're taking on Beast of Winter, one of the 3 big DLCs for Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, which is one of the most popular contenders for the title of Baldur's Gate 2's spiritual successor, or at the very least, it is a modern-day tribute of sorts to our favorite medieval fantasy Infinity Engine-based games from the early 2000s. And one very important thing to consider about Beast of Winter is that you get it as part of the Obsidian Edition package of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire, or you can buy it separately for $9.99. At least that's the price it has now as I'm recording this video. So let's get this out of the way. A DLC that brings in new items, a new location, new boss fights, a new playable companion that you can take along for the rest of the game, a DLC that gives you front row seats to the most fascinating episode in the game's lore that will keep you entertained for 7 or 8 hours, not counting the replay value. I just can't think of too many entertainment products that will give you so much for so little. As far as value goes, this is a no-brainer, guys, seriously. But it's definitely not perfect, and today I'm here to both praise and rant about this hit or miss DLC that kept me entertained for, I would say, 4 hours, and busy for another 3 or 4. So you receive a missive from some guy who wants you to go to the ass end of nowhere to help with something that has nothing to do with your current mission. So you receive a missive from some old lady who wants you to go to the ass end of nowhere to help with something that has nothing to do with your current mission. So you receive a box, inside of which there is a head that comes attached with a spirit who wants you to go to the ass end of nowhere to help with something that has nothing to do with your current mission. Is it me, or does this development team have zero creativity when it comes to tying in their expansion packs to their core games? Anyways, this time this missive comes from a guy called Vatnir. He invites you to come over to an isolated island known as Harbinger's Watch so that you can fulfill a prophecy? So after a few days' trip, you arrive onto the island only to find that everyone there has been eagerly awaiting the arrival of the Dusk Speaker, also known as you. Harbinger's Watch is home to a flock of Rymrgand followers who worship the deity under Harbinger Vatnir's guidance. And for those of you who don't know, in the world of Pillars of Eternity, Rymrgand is the god of entropy and decay. And apparently, being faithful to him involves giving oneself willingly to the end. Wait, what? This makes no sense to begin with. Who the fuck would want to do that?
A creature led nearly 1,000 followers from the United States deep into the jungles of South America.
Well, how about you? Is the best thing ever happened to you?
They would build a new community, free of oppression and violence. It was to be their paradise on Earth.
That the threat of mass suicide was quite real.
Now, this morning, there are fresh reports. Jones ordered a mass suicide. 914 people were murdered or drank Kool-Aid laced with poison.
Oh, never mind then. People in Harbinger's Watch listen to Vatnir because he's a Rymrgand godlike. In the universe of Pillars of Eternity, godlike are regular kith, humans, elves, Amawa, who've been touched by a god. And because of this, they bear physical resemblance to the deity that has fathered them, so to speak. So you eventually find your way to the community's main longhouse, only to run into this.
But the beast would spare us this suffering, would offer us succor, mercy. But it seems our guest has arrived. Come, Dusk Speaker, join our circle. Look upon the Dusk Speaker and be glad, brothers and sisters, for she heralds an end to your suffering.
Oh, so this Vatnir is so cowardly that he doesn't even want to take full responsibility for his prophecies, so he invited you over as the true herald of Rymrgand's end, and has even given you the name of Dusk Speaker.
You can't just go around renaming folk without their say-so.
Now, if you know the story of the Jonestown massacre that took place in Guyana back in 1978, Well, congratulations, you know about one of the darkest, most gruesome passages in the history of humanity. And the bones of that story, before its tragic ending, are not all that different from what's going on at Harbinger's Watch. And yet, Vatnir doesn't come off as that much of an evil, controlling megalomaniac as Jim Jones, nor his flock of Rymrgand faithful feel that much like his victims. It is still the story of people who have been manipulated by a charlatan into believing that dying ahead of time was preferable to other fates. And I still don't know if I like the levity and even the humor with which the game treated this theme. On one hand, it felt like clever mockery of crazy-ass brainwashing religious cults like the one Jones led, but on the other hand, it felt a little bit like it downplayed the seriousness and dangers of these weird-ass sects. Whatever the case may be, I admit that I found Vatnir's balls-to-the-wall cynicism and charlatanery to be refreshing and intriguing. Why did he start this cult? How did he manage to amass so many followers? Is there a way for this character to redeem himself? And I won't be spoiling it to you, but nah, I'm going to spoil the shit out of this character, so
Mind some spoilers coming your way.
Vatnir was sentenced to a life of physical and emotional pain even before he was born. That was Rymrgand's gift to him, that sentimental, softy old cow. He hails from the White That Wends, an inhospitable frozen steppe where people, mostly pale elves, strive to make it through alive every day. It was already hard enough for regular pale elves to survive in these harsh lands, let alone a sickly godlike of the god of entropy and decay like Vatnir. But around the time of Vatnir's youth, as things got worse in the land of the White That Wends, people started to turn to their gods for solutions. And that's when Vatnir saw his opportunity and decided to make the most out of his resemblance to Rymrgand by letting people believe that he was a prophet of the god of decay.
We're rare, the god touched. More so, those changed by the beast of winter. Growing to adulthood in the land, in the White That Wends, it's difficult enough without the numbness, the stiffness. Those of us who do survive, our communities expect things of us. Leadership, wisdom.
So you just donned the role presented you, like a well-cut coat.
I became the leader they expected me to be. Our elders told stories about this place. I suppose I saw in that an opportunity, a chance to leave the land behind. So I claimed I had a vision, and the beast was calling me. The lie was more successful than I could have imagined. And I can imagine quite a lot. The dragon's the more immediate threat. You have a reputation, don't you? You overcome things, you triumph. You're coming to the Deadfire. It seemed too great an opportunity to ignore. I don't know what to tell you. It's a dragon, or looks like one. And rotten enough that linking it to the god of decay seemed reasonable.
You're full of horse apples, you mean?
He eventually gathered a congregation and moved to the place that later became known as Harbinger's Watch, where he led a comfortable life of charlatanery. And when a weird-ass skeleton dragon started attacking the village, he even found a way to talk his flock into believing that this creature was a messenger of Rymrgand himself. Such was Vatnir's eloquence, and the stupidity of the villagers, I suppose, that he even convinced his flock that being killed by the dragon was a privilege.
Don't leave me behind!
He's here for me! He returns! So close.
Such grace! Such majesty!
So because plot, the skeleton dragon happens to show up at the village just as Vatnir is talking to his congregation about your prophetical arrival. Because you're a hero, you go out there, face the dragon, and kill it, and then go back to the Longhouse. You know, a regular day in the life of a watcher. But when you go back into the Longhouse, Vatnir is nowhere to be found. Unless you explore a little bit and discover the entrance to his secret bunker of cowardice, where he's been holding up like the coward little bitch he is. That's when his whole ruse falls apart.
I'm not hiding, I had a sacrifice. Something that I was saving for the messenger, and I couldn't find it, so I was looking for it. You killed it? That's good. That it's dead. It's been harrying the watch now, well, for years. But people keep coming, and it keeps eating. Each time it comes, the ice spreads further. I didn't know how to end it. So I wrote to you.
Certainly telling your followers that it was a manifestation of the divine come to usher them unto oblivion didn't confuse matters.
His fate is now in your hands, and it's super interesting that you actually get the chance of letting the man earn his redemption or leave him to his fate. Even he knows that he's a skeptical opportunist and a charlatan, and I suppose that's why he offers very little resistance when you challenge him and offer him the opportunity to redeem himself. At some point during the game, he even seems eager to earn his redemption. And I find this fascinating because it is a subtle way to let you know that he secretly loathed himself in a way for the life of lies he had led up until that point. But because this is an epic medieval fantasy tale, at the core of this 8-hour expansion pack, there is of course something monumentally evil afoot, something that threatens to end all life everywhere. And of course, you set out to put an end to it. And of course, you are successful. And if you take Vatnir with you on this epic adventure, he ends up being part of something important, something big, something useful. He actually ends up truly saving the lives of those he falsely swore to guide in the name of their god. And by the end of the game, he relinquishes his position as leader of his flock in favor of Harbinger Hafjord, his second in command, a man who, unlike him, was always a true follower of Rymrgand's faith, even if the cult itself was one big lie. And the reason why Vatnir abdicates in favor of Hafjord is because he realizes that he's actually capable of doing good things for others, and you are the dwarf, or Orlin in this case, who helped him come to these realizations. How's that for a character arc for a follower? It pretty much beats the crap out of almost every companion in the game. But let's talk about the epic adventure that you, and maybe Vatnir, embark upon in this game, because that's what you're paying the price of the admission for. One video ago. If there were a ratio of amount of time needed to complete the game versus amount of time in which the game was actually fun to play, I would say Pillars 2 is very, very high up there. And, well, quite a bit of that chunk of the game that is not fun to play can be found in this DLC, unfortunately. This is by far the part of the game in which I had to reload the most due to oh fuck I didn't expect this shit moments. And I'm not talking about robbing myself out of the negative consequences of making bad decisions story-wise or even combat-wise. I'm not that kind of coward little bitch. A different type of coward little bitch. I'm talking, for example, about traps that go off and take an entire endurance bar. There is a shitload of those in this game.
Shit! Fuck! God damn.
I brought Maya along for a large portion of the game and Mirka for the rest, both of whom had high levels of perception and +1 or +2 perception gear, and even brought a +1 perception pet that wasn't even cute. And even then, I had to stand right next to most traps to even have a chance of detecting them. The location prior to Rymrgand's temple is stuffed with the damned things, but they are also annoying in the location for the Inquisition questline and Waidwen's questline. But my frustration with the Beast of Winter DLC does not end with its ridiculous number of traps, unfortunately. This DLC has some of the worst combat sequences in the game. Figuring out how to overcome a combat encounter still requires some tactical thinking, and that is still as awesome as it's always been in this series. But I am actually shocked that the combat in this DLC falls into a pitfall that this series as a whole has always been very careful not to fall into, and that is damage spongy mobs who make every fight go on for ages. The fights per se aren't even all that difficult once you figure them out tactically, they're just boring. That's the kind of tedium that made me detest many of the encounters in the Pathfinder series. And hey, the recommended level for this DLC is supposed to be 15-ish, but I was level 17 at the time, and I had pretty decent gear too. That's not to say that the combat in this game is a bore fest, at least not all the time. Some fights are actually pretty awesome. Boss fights are a standout, of course, even if they are not in the same league as the mega boss encounters. And you get to fight 3 bosses in this DLC, so you'll be spending an important chunk of the game fighting them. Beast of Winter also pressed many wrong keys for me with some of its design decisions. The 3 main quests in this game consists of bits that are locked behind do things in the right order challenges. and I can't begin to tell you how much I detest those. Once you enter Rymrgand's realm, you'll be revisiting 3 of the most important passages in the history of Eora, and this is sensationally awesome actually, and we'll get to that later. But right now, we are going to talk about their irritating design. One of these 3 questlines has you reliving a Leaden Key Inquisition trial. For this questline, you have to visit 3 temples, but you must do so by navigating an uncomfortable system of portals to move back and forth between the area's locations.
That's alright.
It's not bad. It's not terrible, or at least not terrible because of the teleporting. The ridiculous number of traps and the super drawn out combat encounters make sure you get the terrible bit in this location. Also, if this is the first questline you do, it won't be readily obvious that you have to do a certain something in a certain order to get a certain boon that'll come in handy for the boss fight that takes place later on. Another questline has you revisiting Waidwen's last day alive. Story-wise, this is the best part of the game. And I'm not talking about the DLC, I mean the best part of the entire game. But it also has this time-traveling mechanic which, gameplay-wise, translated into a trial and error do things in the right order challenge. As a device to move forward the story, the ability to go back and forth in time to revisit moments of Waidwen's last day alive as still memories that have become frozen in time was simply phenomenal. I don't know how much you'll end up paying for this DLC, but this passage alone makes it a worthwhile investment regardless. But as a gameplay mechanic, it was so fucking annoying. Then there is the story of the narcissistic Huana King. This questline takes place in a location that you navigate by using a system of locks that alter the flow of water around its many locations, allowing you passage between its zones. This part was especially annoying as I didn't always know where I had to go, and that forced me to backtrack a lot, and I hate backtracking. It also has some surprise motherfucker encounters with enemies that come out of nowhere and that made me reload because the tactical disadvantage of not knowing what laid ahead beforehand was too much of a pain in the ass. And I think that's about it pertaining to the things that I don't like about the level design and the combat. Unfortunately, there is more I didn't like. I've made it no secret in this channel that I think that Baldur's Gate 2 far surpassed its predecessor in almost every respect. There is, however, one tiny thing that I think the original game did better than its sequel, and that was the humor. And a great deal of what I like about the humor in the original Baldur's Gate has to do with the many completely over-the-top humorous dialogue options that you get in this game. Humor in the original Baldur's Gate game was clearly not a product of writers improvising a funny moment every now and then when they felt like it. No, this is something that is present throughout most of the game, and the writers were careful enough to keep the humor in the game from becoming farcical. You don't get the choice of a snarky comment or a smart-ass remark while you are sorting things out at the Duskwood Mine, for example, which is one of the darkest moments of the game. Humor is not Pillars of Eternity's forte, not by a long shot. But in Pillars 2, you and your companions get your chance every now and then to bring some humor and levity to the situation at hand. But it's always done in a restrained, believable way. Even at its worst, it's never ludicrous. And this means that the humor in this series is nothing like the over-the-top campiness and cheesiness that you get in Dungeons & Dragons games.
It's similar to some magical wards I've seen, but...
It doesn't work. Perhaps he made a spelling mistake.
Who else? Even without Edroth, Bloodspear never followed Yarks.
Yarks? Huh, that's us, just so you know. Probably means piece of...
It means non-orcs, that's all.
You speak Orcish?
Enough to know non-orc from piece of...
Really? Oh, please, what's the word? I must know.
And for whatever reason, I feel like they tried to change that for the Beast of Winter DLC. This time you have the choice of making all sorts of highly inappropriate comments and smart-ass remarks. But this comes a little too late in the game, man. I mean, you did provide me with the occasional funny option throughout the rest of the game, but if I had had Baldur's Gate levels of humorous dialogue options from the get-go, I would have taken them right from the start. But now these options feel like out of character to me. And I know this is a very personal take, and I know that most of you probably don't even feel this way about your dialogue choices in Beast of Winter. I just thought I'd share my take with you. And you must be thinking, holy shit Alex, you really didn't like this expansion at all, did you? But as a matter of fact, I did. Not as much as the Forgotten Sanctum DLC, but I did. And now that I've gotten the things that I didn't like out of the way, let's get to the things that I did like. In the first Pillars of Eternity game, there was what I would call a Deerwooden campfire story. And I say it was a campfire story because it didn't become known to you because you read it somewhere or because some narrator puked it out on you. No, you pieced it together by listening to everyone's side of the story. Cryptic Magron priests, regular Deerwooden country folk, city rabble-rousers, everyone had a little something to add to this campfire tale. This was the story of Waidwen, the man-turned-god who started a rebellion, took it too far, and because of that, received a Deerwooden welcome one fateful night at Vatnir Bridge. That's the quick version at least. I thoroughly recommend that you play the first Pillars of Eternity game if you want to hear the long version from the people of the Deerwood themselves. The devil, or in this case the god, is in the details. And that's why this story is interesting enough for you to want to know more about Waidwen. I for once was curious about a few things. What kind of person was he? How did he come to be on that bridge that day? If he was widely recognized as the living incarnation of the god Eothas, why did they kill him? And I really wasn't expecting to get any answers to those questions after a game and a half, especially considering that Pillars 2 went on quite a bit of a different direction, leaving the Deerwood and its lore behind for the most part. So I was very pleasantly surprised when the game offered not only answers to most of those questions, but also a vivid recollection of the events that took place during that passage of Deerwooden history. And I don't know about you guys, but this retelling of Waidwen's last day alive, and the moment in which the Godhammer blew him to hell and gone, felt to me like some of those magical movies and games that bring to life characters and events from your most beloved books almost exactly as you pictured them in your mind. If you know what I'm talking about, you know how awesome this feeling is. And they nailed it in the Beast of Winter DLC with a retelling of Waidwen's demise. You get the chance to talk to Waidwen's soul, frozen in time within still memories of the fateful events that took place that night at Vatnir Bridge. You get front row seats to his troubled past. You get to witness firsthand the moment in which Eothas gave him the choice to rebuild a kingdom. But the best part is that at one point of this retelling of events, you get to wear the skin of one of the 12 priests who created the Godhammer, the weapon that brought about Waidwen's demise. And if you played the first game, you know who this priest was. And because you traveled with him for a long time and got to know him, you know the answer that he would have given to this question. And I just loved that the Beast of Winter expansion rewarded me for having this knowledge. Also, the moment you walk through this portal and you see this frozen scene, if you played the first game, and if you don't have Eder and Shoti with you at that time, you are 100% going to go back to fetch them because you know they're going to have things to say. And they don't disappoint this time, and neither does Waidwen.
Point me toward the fiend that means you harm and I'll drag it down to oblivion with me. Onward.
Going into battle alongside St. Waidwen. Every day brings something new.
Never thought I'd be fighting beside an honest-to-God saint. Makes a gal feel real righteous.
The icing on the cake is that if you play your cards right, he will agree to help you in the upcoming battle against the dragon Neris Kirlis. And you will get to see the Godhammer in action. Though not particularly tough, this battle is quite memorable. The stakes and the events leading up to it make it so, and after you're done with it, you find yourself in Rymrgand's realm. And I must admit that I was pretty freaking intrigued and frightened even. How in hell am I going to get out of here? I'm pretty scuffed after that battle with the dragon. I'm not quite sure I'm going to make it, I thought. The agony was real, and that feeling is as much as I can ask from a game. The combat encounters in this final stretch dragged on for a lot longer than they should have, like many other fights in this DLC, but your final encounter with Rymrgand made up for all the tedium you suffered through in this final bit, especially if you bring Vatnir and Icewind with you. And hey, do it. If you want to see Vatnir's character arc come full circle, do it. So you'll get the Beast of Winter DLC as part of Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire Obsidian Edition, or you can get it as a DLC for $9.99 as it was originally intended. And though it has some of the worst and most annoying passages in Pillars of Eternity as a whole, it also has some of the best. And if you like the series so far, this is a piece you don't want to miss. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, thank you for watching all the way up until now. If you like what you're seeing in this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. Share the video, but most importantly, never stop gaming. But don't let gaming get in the way of your hopes and dreams. Bye everyone.